So cultural intelligence is really one of the latest blocks in the building blocks of the intelligences. So if we start with intelligence, the IQ, this is really, let's say, how smart you are or how good you are at your job. And then it went up to the next block when we looked at emotional intelligence. So this was how well you could take your knowledge and then apply it with the people around you. So could you read your audience? Could you temper your own emotions and your own wording and your stress levels, etc., to make sure that you are able to communicate your message well and have it understood? And then this last block, this cultural intelligence, is really recognizing that you can be very smart at your job and you can have the emotional intelligence in your home environment. But when you're faced with people from different cultures, can you also have the same success in terms of being able to understand where they're coming from, how you might need to approach a situation which might be different from what you're used to? So it's really gaining more of an understanding of what are the different lenses different cultures come at situations with, and then how can you then start adapting to those to make sure that you're as successful as you can be in your job. I don't think this is unusual in this day and age because most companies are working with different cultures. So whether they be on your staff, whether it be your management, whether it be your clients or your suppliers, generally people are tied into this global world. So somewhere in your chain you're going to have people from different cultures coming together. So when we talk about cultural interactions, it's almost in every country, 98%. When we look at ways to be successful in that, the first step is really to have some kind of training to understand where those cultural clashes may come, where are the areas that have the most friction, where there might be the most differences, so that once you know where that is, you can begin to you can identify it and then you can work towards smoothing those out. Now, if you're already in an area where you're having a particular barrier or particular problem, you might want to reach out and get some kind of third-party consultant or advisor to help you through that particular situation. Because sometimes we're too close to a situation or we're caught in our own cultural lens that we can't appreciate the other side or how to move through it. So sometimes that's really where an outside consultant, a training, some kind of troubleshooting session, you can even do team building activities that have a slant towards cultural understanding. So there are activities within team building that can also be applied to the cultural setting that can start to work through some of those problems already. First and foremost, I think exposure. So asking questions in the hiring stage that can uncover what kind of exposure they've had to different nationalities and how deep that exposure has been. For instance, you could find somebody who's well-traveled, but if they've just been a tourist for a week here, a week there, it's not really deep enough to start really getting down into the cultural components which make us similar and different. You really want somebody who has spent enough time and done some kind of critical project or critical work that can start to uncover some of the differences. So if I were to look at a candidate who's traveled all over the world but for 1 or 2 week intervals as a tourist versus someone who's lived in one country for 6 months or a year and say, well, which one might be stronger, I would likely say the 6 months to 1 year in one country, simply because in that time they've really had enough exposure to how people operate in the workplace or in a school environment. They've seen perhaps a family interact over a series of weekends and over a series of family dramas to understand how families evolve or how friendships evolve. So really screening for that. Second would be to ask about differences. What differences did they observe, and how did that make them feel, or what did they notice about their own way of doing things? I asked this question some time ago, and I would get people who said, oh, I lived in Australia and Jollibee had they didn't have spaghetti on the menu, or McDonald's, excuse me, didn't have spaghetti on the menu. That's a difference. That's too surface level. What we really want is to find people who could say, when I was surprised to find in Australia that even the staff level were giving feedback to the bosses very frankly, or even the custodian of the building was calling the boss by his first name. These are where you're already starting to uncover cultural differences in hierarchy and in expectations of flatness within a culture, and that's the important thing to try to uncover in interviews.